All the Young Dudes, James' Perspective by Stay in Dreams. Chapter 7. First Year, Marauders. Wednesday, the 15th September 1971. The next morning, James and Sirius were practically bouncing with excitement, hardly able to keep still as they dragged their groggy dormmates down to the breakfast before any other Gryffindors had even thought about getting out of bed. They charged into the Great Hall, the first students to arrive, apart from a few blurry-eyed Ravenclaws, already buried in their huge revision books, clutching oversized mugs of black coffee like lifelines. "Perfect," Sirius declared, his grin almost slipping his face in two. "Front row seats." "But no one shows up for hours," Peter grumbled, barely awake, his head propped up on his elbows. "Oh, cheer up," James said, pouring them all large mugs of tea. "Don't you want to see the fruits of our labor?" "Not at 6 in the morning," Peter mumbled, taking a noisy slurp of his tea. Sirius winced at the sound and shoved a plate of toast towards him. "Have some toast and stop whining." Remus, ever the meticulous one, took a piece of toast and carefully cut it into 4 equal pieces. He spread marmalade on one, jam on another, butter on the third, and lemon curd on the last. Sirius raised an amused eyebrow at this, but Remus just carried on, seemingly oblivious. James caught the exchange and couldn't help but smile at Remus, a small, fond smile that he didn't quite manage to suppress. Remus's odd little habits always seemed to amuse him. Despite Peter's grumpy prediction, it wasn't long before the students began trickling into the hall for breakfast. Remus had just finished devouring his concoction of toast when a group of Slytherins arrived. 3 boys and 2 girls, third years by the look of them. The 4 Gryffindors watched with bated breath as the Slytherins took their seats at their table, reaching for platters of food as if nothing was amiss. For a few tense moments it really did seem like nothing was different. Sirius sighed, disappointed. But then it started. The tallest boy in the group shifted uncomfortably in his seat, rubbing his arm. Another kept fumbling in his pocket, but from where James was sitting it looked more like he was scratching his leg furiously. The third boy had his wand out and was using it to scratch behind his ear. "It worked!" James whispered, his voice trembling with barely contained glee. Even Peter, still half asleep, was starting to wake up properly, a slow smile creeping onto his face. As more Slytherins filtered into the Great Hall, it became glaringly obvious that something was very wrong on the other side of the room. By 7 o'clock, the entire Slytherin table was full of squirming, scratching, and increasingly frantic students. The girls looked terrified, and the boys were desperately trying to maintain their dignity while clawing at their own skin. Aim Cuscaro, a particular blurry 6th year, finally snapped. He tore off his robes, his school jumpers, and even his tie, scratching at his chest with what was already an angry shade of red. For a fleeting moment, James almost felt bad for them. But that sympathy evaporated the instant Severus Snape walked in. James thought he might actually die from trying to hold in his laughter. Poor Snape seemed to have had the worst reaction to the rose-hip seats. He stalked into the hall, head bowed, greasy hair hanging over his face like a curtain. But even that couldn't hide the mess beneath. His nose was swollen and shiny, bright, angry red. "Oh, Merlin!" Sirius wheezed, clutching his stomach as he tried to catch his breath from laughing so hard. "Tell me who got his face." James, his mind already whirring, seized the opportunity to bestow a new nickname on Snape. "Oi, Snivetus!" he shouted, flashing Sirius a mischievous grin. Snape spun around, his hair parting just enough to reveal the full extent of the damage. The left side of his face was covered in an angry rash red and blotchy from his temple down to his neck, disappearing under his uniform. His left eye was bloodshot, the the lid swollen and irritated. "Looking good!" Sirius crowded, and the 4 Gryffindors dissolved into fits of laughter as Snape stormed out of the hall, his robes flaring behind him. By the time breakfast was over, the entire castle was buzzing with rumors about what had happened to the Slytherin boys. James and Sirius looked like Christmas had come early, and even Peter had cheered up remarkably, constantly reminding them that his diligent lookout skills had made the whole operation possible. "It was all Lupin's idea, though," Sirius pointed out, after Peter had mentioned his lookout duties for the 5th time that morning. "What shall we do to celebrate, eh? Exploding Snap? Raid the kitchens?" Remus, looking slightly embarrassed by the praise, shook his head, smiling politely. "Well, whatever you do, you're doing it without me," he said. "I've got double detention." "From Slughorn?" James asked, frowning. "Yeah, and McGonagall and Flitwick, but that's tomorrow. And I've got herbology detention over the weekend." "Bloody hell, mate!" James frowned deeper. "You going for a record or something?" Remus just shrugged, looking away, but James wasn't satisfied. He couldn't quite figure Remus out, no matter how hard he tried. It wasn't for lack of effort either. Since the first day they'd become doormates, James had made it his personal mission to make sure none of them ever felt left out. With Sirius and Peter it was easy. They stuck close no matter what. But Remus was different. He was guarded, like he was always holding something back. Every now and then James would catch a glimpse of the real Remus, a crack in the wall. But just as quickly those walls would be back up, reinforced, even stronger than before. But James Potter wasn't one to give up easily. One day, he was sure he'd break through those walls. "Maybe you start better doing your homework," Sirius suggested gently. Remus rolled his eyes, getting up from the table. "Come on," he said, heading for the door. "It's defense against the dark arts first. Thought you two loved that." Later that day, after Remus had trudged off to detention and Peter had scampered away to check out some chess club or other, James found himself heading to the Owlery with Sirius. He couldn't help but feel a bit surprised by the whole situation. Sirius had asked to borrow James's family owl, Hattie, which was odd enough considering that the Blacks had their own fleet of owls. But when Sirius casually mentioned that his mother had confiscated their family owl, James's confusion only deepened. He hadn't dared to ask why, not with the way Sirius reacted whenever his family was brought up. It was like saying the word black made Sirius want to disappear into the floor, and James wasn't keen on pushing him into one of his darker moods. The night before, when they were all riding high on the success of their prank, Sirius had approached James with a request. It had been after the others had drifted off to sleep, and James had been lying in bed, still buzzing with the thrill of their mischief, when the curtains around his four-poster were gently pulled back. "Sirius? Hi. What's going on, mate?" I sort of had something to ask you." James had blinked away his tiredness and, with a groggy smile, sat up, sweeping his arms out in an exaggerated gesture of welcome. "Please, good sir, come in." Sirius smiled in relief and clambered onto the bed, settling himself on his knees atop the blanket. The curtains fell shut behind him, creating a small private space just for the two of them. It felt like a little fort, a sanctuary from the outside world. "So," James prompted, his eyes bright with curiosity, "what is it? Have you already got a plan for our next mission?" He was grinning, half expecting some wild new scheme, but Sirius only looked back at him with a nervous smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "No, sorry, I was going to ask if I could borrow your owl." James blinked, taken aback by the simple request. "Oh, yeah, sure, mate." "Thanks," Sirius said, and there was an awkward pause. James felt the familiar urge to break the silence, but Sirius beat him to it. "It's just, I promised Regulus, my brother, that I'd write, and well, obviously I haven't been able to, and I figure I should check in, just make sure he's okay." Yeah, of course," James nodded, his brow furrowing slightly. Why hadn't Sirius mentioned having a brother before? The idea of siblings was foreign to James, who had always been an only child. He'd seen other kids with brothers and sisters, and it seemed like a mix of love and rivalry, something he couldn't quite wrap his head around. You either loved someone or hated them, right? "You can borrow my all any time. What's mine is yours." Sirius nodded, swallowing hard. "Okay, yeah, cheers, mate, thanks." As Sirius clambered out of the bed, James yawned, already half asleep again, as he mumbled, "Any time." Now, as they made their way to the orrery, Sirius was unusually quiet, fidgeting with the letter in his hands. It made James uneasy, but he didn't want to force Sirius to talk about whatever was bothering him, so instead he kept up a steady stream of chatter about the new spell they were learning in defense against the dog odds. It wasn't until Hattie, Sirius had burst out laughing the first time James told him the old's name, had flown off, letter in tow, and they were on their way back to the dormitory that James paused. He laid a hand gently on Sirius's arm, stopping him in the corridor. "Hey," he said quietly, even though there was no one else around. "Are you all right?" Sirius hadn't stopped fidgeting, his fingers twisting together as they walked, and he hadn't really been paying attention to anything James had said. Whatever was going on in his head had him so distracted that it was like he wasn't even there. When Sirius finally looked up, he plastered on one of his trademark grins, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Who, me?" "Peachy, thanks for asking." "Why are you lying to me?" But James didn't push him. Not yet. They walked the rest of the way to the Gryffindor common room in silence. When Peter returned from his club and challenged James to a game of chess, the opportunity to get Sirius to open up slipped away. Still, James couldn't shake the nagging feeling that there was something important Sirius wasn't telling him. He wanted Sirius to trust him, to open up the way he did with the others. If Remus had walls, then Sirius had a fire, a wild, untamed thing that burned bright for everyone to see, but could scorch anyone who got too close. But James wasn't afraid of getting burned. He wanted to show Sirius that it was okay to let someone in, that he didn't have to keep everything hidden behind that blazing exterior. James had never had anyone he could talk to the way he talked to Sirius, not even his parents. His whole life he'd been the golden boy, always putting his best foot forward, always smiling, always gentle, always trying to make others feel at ease. It was what made him feel important, like he was doing something good in the world. But with Sirius, sometimes he felt the opposite urge. He wanted to drop the act, to show him the parts of himself he kept buried deep down. But he was also terrified of what Sirius would think if he stopped shining like the sun. Eventually, Sirius, unable to sit still, put on one of his records. When Peter complained about the noise, Sirius sighed dramatically and fetched a pair of headphones, plopping them over his head before sprawling back on the couch. James and Peter were still engrossed in their chess game when Remus finally returned from his detention, dropping down on the couch next to Sirius. James listened in on their conversation, even as his eyes remained fixed on the chessboard, more to keep Peter happy than out of any real interest. He knew there was no use trying to win. Peter had always been better at chess. Sirius pulled his headphones off as soon as Remus sat down. "That was quick." "Only had to do one in the end," Remus replied. "Slughorn let me off, too busy trying to sort out the itching powder fiasco." "That prank is the gift that keeps on giving." "Snape was allergic and everything," Remus said. "That ginger girl said he's been in the hospital wing all day." James flinched, his mind immediately flashing back to the girl on the train. Why was Remus talking about her? Were they friends? "Which ginger girl?" he asked quickly, looking up from the chessboard. "Checkmate!" Peter cried triumphantly. "You know, the annoying one, Evans." "I don't think she's annoying." James frowned, puzzled. He hadn't seen her do anything annoying at all. She told Snivellus off on the train for being a brat. She was in Gryffindor, so she had to be decent, and she seemed pretty sharp in classes too, and he supposed she was kind of pretty, especially with those big green eyes. So, what if the others thought she was annoying? A pretty girl was still a pretty girl. "Okay," Remus shrugged. "Let's not talk about girls," Sirius interrupted pointedly. "This might be the most important day of our lives. This is the day we became legends, the day our friendship was forged in the fire of itching powder." "They don't know it was us, do they?" Peter asked nervously as he began to tidy away the chess set. Remus shook his head. "Slughorn reckons it was a Slytherin girl, or a gang of marauders." "Marauders!" Sirius sat up suddenly, his eyes bright with excitement. "That's it! Raise your glasses, boys!" James shot him a bemused smile. "We don't have glasses." "Well, just pretend!" Sirius shook his head irritably. "From this day forward, we are the Marauders." James considered the name for a moment. Maybe it was a bit obnoxious to name your friend group, but the way Sirius said it made it seem like the most natural thing in the world. The Marauders. When Sirius said it, it sounded elegant, playful, and just a little bit dangerous. Like the name of a secret superhero squad. He stared at Sirius in awe before breaking into a wide grin. Peter glanced at him, unsure, looking for direction. Remus, however, burst out laughing. "What sort of poncy gang name is that?"